Okay.
All right, there we are. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome. It is 9 a.m. sharp on Saturday, November 4th. Welcome back. Appreciate everybody tuning in to another live stream here on the newly named Code Noobs Programming for Beginners Facebook page or Facebook group. Welcome, guys. Good morning. How's it going, Danny and Randy?
Good, man. How you doing?
Good, good. Long week, lots of coding, lots of working.
Yes.
But yeah, it's Saturday morning, so got my coffee.
Mm.
Got That's it. Just my
Big day
coffee.
tomorrow. Remember the 5th of November.
Oh
Time
yeah,
to watch V for Vendetta yet
time to
again.
hack the government.
Oh my gosh, that is from B for Vendetta. I haven't seen that movie in
Yeah,
forever.
it's a
Same.
great movie.
It was good.
Recommend to
Yeah.
anybody who's never seen that.
Well,
Anyway,
was that where the
oh
anonymous mask came from?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
hmm
So if you want to be a hacker, you have to watch that movie.
You
hmm
just have to.
But yeah.
It's required
Anyway,
material.
so today's topic is not actually hacking or V for Vendetta. It is imposter syndrome. What is imposter syndrome? How do you guys like define that?
I would say it's like being a wolf in sheep's clothing.
You would, because I would argue that it's not exactly that.
I mean,
We had this
yeah,
argument before the live stream about
yeah.
wolf in sheep's clothing. I
All,
see. I
all
feel like
around a
it's
picture.
a wolf is like malicious, and the sheep's clothing is like to look innocent.
But
But
he's being an imposter.
he is an imposter.
He
It's
is an
true. He's
imposter.
an
That is
imposter
true.
among the
Yeah.
sheep. So what is an
Imposters.
imposter though? Can we define it without like using the word
Yes.
imposter? Like we're in fourth
It's
grade.
when you feel as if you don't belong. I mean, basically
Yeah.
that's it. Like when you feel like you don't belong, when you feel like you're not good enough, when you feel like, you don't belong within a community, within a company, with whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just that
Yeah.
feeling of being, not being good enough.
Have you ever felt that as a developer?
Oh God, yeah, all the time. I mean, who hasn't,
Yeah.
especially when I think it's especially we're especially prone to it when we're, you know, learning stuff and you're at that point where like you feel like things are going well, like it's new, but you've learned a decent amount of the new stuff and then you start to hit the real problems,
Yeah.
because like the more you know, the more problems you run into. That's all how it always is, and you don't yet have that confidence or the tools to work through them, and you start to really feel like it, and it can really drag you down too. I mean, it's imposter syndrome cited as a good reason why a lot of people like don't finish college or leave jobs or leave things that they really want to do. So it is something very difficult. I think that people will have to deal with.
Yeah.
And you
You
and
made
you
me
feel like everybody's gonna figure you out and you're gonna get
Yeah.
exposed and then it's gonna
Mhm.
be the end of the world.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that because I never really thought about it that way. Like I just like I did internally, but I never like put that in words that way. And then I read that the other day, and it really just like hit me. Like that is the feeling of like other people are gonna be like, "Oh, Randall, you're pretending to be a developer. Like, what the
Yeah.
heck, man?" And it's like it's so crazy because it's so irrational in so many ways. Like, has anyone ever called you out on something like that at anything in life? Like ever? I feel like it's so rare that somebody's like, look at this guy, he's trying to be a developer, but he's not,
Well,
or
dude, it
Yeah.
happened. It happened to me when I was a kid and I was skateboarding, and everybody was like, "Oh, you're a poser."
yeah,
but
such a poser. I mean, I
but
just want to. Here's one tactic that I think is just the core of how to get over imposter syndrome. Okay. And I think it really matters, like, or really relates to like the skateboarding thing that you're talking about, right? The people who are like, are telling you, oh, you're such a loser or whatever because you pretending to be a skateboarder. They also didn't know how to skateboard at some point, right? Like nobody was born a skateboarder. Sorry, you weren't. Maybe you
Yeah.
started skateboarding at 2 years old because your parents like got you into it, but you still sucked when you were two, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So like everybody has to start somewhere, and you're always going to be an imposter until you're like the best. But you have to do that, and you have to keep like progressing and practicing and honing your craft until you become that. And so it's not an imposter, you're just learning. Like
Well, actually, and to
that's my
that
take.
point, one of the worst things that we do when we face imposter syndrome is we compare ourselves to others.
Mm-hmm.
And so we look outside ourselves and we say, like, oh, well, that guy at work who, might be have 10 years of experience is, does it so fast and so well, and they seem to know everything, and I don't know anything, but you just
Yeah.
started, and it's like,
Yeah.
why should you? Or, like you see somebody who just, like to skateboarding, right? Somebody who really knows what they're doing. You're like, well, they're so good. I must be an imposter because I suck. It's like, well, you just started. And it's
Yeah.
always this gap in like lived experience between the two individuals. So it's an unfair comparison,
It is.
that we
And
put ourselves in.
I think it's unfair too that we just assume that the expert doesn't make mistakes either. Like the expert skateboarder, and all of a sudden we're talking about skateboarding instead of development, but the expert skateboarder still falls, right? They still like
Yeah.
mess up, don't land tricks, they like whatever.
Dude,
Um,
Tony Hawk like
yeah,
broken bones when he was like 50,
yeah,
because
like
he didn't like,
but he still tries, right? He
yeah.
doesn't give up. He's still trying to get better. And so that's part of imposter syndrome. I actually saw this like meme the other day that I thought was pretty funny. And it was related to imposter syndrome with developers. Basically, it was like a roller coaster. So it was like up, down, up, down, up, down. And it was like me as a developer. And it's like the downside, like the bottom of the roller coaster was like imposter syndrome, and the top side was like God syndrome. Like, so it's like I think I know nothing. I think I know everything. And it just goes back and forth. And I feel like that's really true for development because there's like one of the things that just think causes so much imposter syndrome in software development is that there's like millions and millions of code bases, libraries, frameworks, tools, and they just
Oh
keep
yeah.
popping up like every day. It's literally impossible to keep track of all of them. And so you're
And then you
always
get
like,
somebody's like, you don't know, blah blah blah,
yeah,
and
you
it's
don't
like it just
know
came
like
out
some
yesterday.
obscure shit. Yeah, what the heck? And it's like you're always going to feel imposter syndrome in software development to some degree. And so, like, to me, what I try to do is just focus, like, stay in my lane. What do I love doing? What makes, what am I passionate about? What makes me happy when I'm like working in development? And just keep focusing on that and ignore the noise, right? Like, ignore
Yeah.
even your own internal noise of like, I'm not good enough. This isn't working. But that's part of, I don't think you can become a better software developer without making mistakes. And that's sort of the core of like imposter syndrome is making mistakes, feeling inadequate. But that's part of it, right?
But the other
I
thing too
think.
is you gotta remember when you're a new developer too, I think, and just a developer in general is like those mistakes are when you're gonna learn the most too.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like when you solve problems, that's when you remember that stuff the most. It's usually important things. And so it's a
Yeah.
chance to overcome whatever position you are in. And I think like the best thing you can do is compare yourself to your own self. Where was I a month ago? Where was
Yeah.
I a year ago? Could I even have read this document? Could I even have tried to do this project then? Probably not.
Yeah.
And you see the progress that way. And then you realize that, you're just in a learning journey, like everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like there is a lot. I mean, there's so many different frameworks and things and languages, but like that's the other thing. That's the other cool thing about development, though, is there's so many angles you can take and so many things you can do that like it never gets old. There's always something to learn.
Yeah, totally. I had this experience actually this week where I was feeling a lot of imposter syndrome. So I'm working with this company now, and I have a very senior backend developer who I'm working with, like pretty hand in hand. And, you know, I wouldn't consider myself an extremely senior developer. I would say like mid, like intermediate to lower senior, and depending upon what we're talking about too, because obviously, like when it comes to some stuff, like I'm beyond junior developer. Like that's just part of it, right? There's no such thing as like I love so total side topic, but like I love seeing people's resumes when they list every single coding language under the sun. They're like, yeah, I'm expert at all those. Hey, I got a thumbs up.
Nice.
What's going on? Oh, okay. That was weird. So like when people like have, oh, I know C, I know Java, I know JavaScript, HTML, CSS, SQL, like every single thing under the sun. You're like, you don't know any of that. You just heard those. So anyway,
Yeah.
I have this like crazy like this experience this week where I've been working with this developer, and he's very senior. He's worked on tons of projects. And I actually asked him, I was like, I just sort of want like feedback from you regarding like my code. Like, how do you feel like it is compared to other code bases that you've seen? And he was basically like, he took some time to look over all my code, and he was like, your code is great and it's very clean, and it looks amazing. So sometimes it's great to just get that like reassurance from somebody else and just ask for that feedback, right? Because I'm doing it not to be like judgmental of myself, but I just want to improve myself. And I think it's important that like we sort of humble ourselves as developers, and like, and imposter syndrome goes away when you're just humble, right? When you're like, I just want to learn. I'm willing to like be humble. Like if I suck, I suck. Like that's fine because I'm trying to get better. So it was a cool experience of just like having this developer. And what was interesting too was we're working on a project that uses Firebase, and I actually know Firebase a lot better than he does because he works a lot with AWS. So it was cool because he's working on like back end stuff. And I was like, well, if you need me to like coach you, I'll coach you. And it was like so weird because it's like he's been working in development for like probably 3 times as long as I have. And it was just weird to be able to be like, I'll teach you how to do this as like a sort of like intermediate developer to a senior developer. And he was also like, awesome, let's do that. And I think that's something that's pretty cool about like this industry in general, is that most people are not judgmental. And if they are, they're just a straight up dick, and that's on them. But like most people are not judgmental. They're more than willing to help you learn and like encourage you. Like I don't think I met like 2 people on Facebook before who were like tried to like bring me down. And I was like, okay, dude, like nobody cares your opinion, but that's it. Most people are going to be like, yeah, it's awesome. Like this is the next step. This is how you should. I mean, that's what we're trying to build here, right? We want a community that's positive and we encourage each other to grow as developers. What do you guys think? Agree?
Yeah, I think you got to ask questions too, and like you said, humble yourself because
Yeah.
there's going to be stuff you don't know, and like that's a good that story was a good example too because the senior developer is willing to learn from somebody else too because they also
Yeah.
realize they don't know everything. There's so much
Yeah.
stuff out there you just can't. Like, yeah, he'll probably be able to pick it up quick because he knows back end, and that's
Right.
great. But like it's helpful to have somebody that's already used it, and it's just important to ask questions and not be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
Because it's
Totally.
like then you'll know the answer. Then you can help somebody else with it later, and that's really all it is to it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I look at imposter syndrome as kind of a hint that you're going in the right direction, because the only
Mm.
time you ever really feel imposter syndrome is when you're doing something new and you're getting outside of your comfort zone. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as that new thing that you're doing is in the direction that you want to or will benefit your life in some way, I say just embrace it and go for it. Because I'm sure a lot of people can look back in their lives and see moments when they faced imposter syndrome and got through it. Like I remember
Mm-hmm.
when I studied physics in undergrad, but we had to learn computer programming, and I got a job doing programming for a government agency because they had a giant budget and they needed programmers, and I knew the language that they needed. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing was, I look back then and I could barely write a program. I could barely even read a program at that time. Like I shocked myself that I was able to do that job, but they put me in an office with another senior developer so that he could help me grow. And it was something where dealing with that imposter syndrome, you get over it after a while. But you have to I think there's a good mental exercise that you can do that's like, what would it take for me to actually not feel like an imposter in this situation? And
Mm.
then recognize that maybe you don't need that, or maybe you can just give that to yourself, because a lot of
Yeah.
times is there are other things that we do where we don't feel like an imposter. And so why is that with that thing, but this thing I feel like an imposter? Maybe because this actually means something to me.
It's
Yeah.
usually stuff we value. Yeah, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's stuff that really means something to us.
I'm curious, do you feel like looking back upon that experience now, do you feel like you were an imposter working that job?
Oh dude, I remember I was sweating. I remember like I was sweating in front
No,
of
but
a
but
computer.
like now, do you feel like you were actually an imposter then? Like in
Oh,
your present like knowledge, are you like, hey, that dude was an imposter, like he shouldn't have been working for that
yeah,
company,
he
or
was
like,
just I mean, he was just beginning, and I'm pretty sure that like that's the thing. Like, I was afraid of getting exposed, of getting found out. I was afraid that like everybody's gonna know that I can barely read code, and I'm
yeah,
pretty sure they already knew that anyways. But
Dude,
like,
yeah,
dude,
yeah,
guarantee they
exactly.
did. It's the government. They were planning long term. They probably saw that you were somebody that could learn, and if you
yeah,
stuck with it, you'd be
They're
good,
just
so they could teach you.
they're just
That's
trying
all
to
it is.
burn through tax dollars, man. They don't
Yeah,
even
right,
that's
care.
all.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is it's an interesting one. Like, I mean, I don't know. I think it's so prevalent everywhere, but I like the point that you guys made that usually when you feel imposter syndrome, it means that you care about what it is and you care about like your the way that people view you in that role, which is good, right? That means that you care about what you're doing. Um,
You
so
care
yeah,
about your performance, dude, because like think about it. You wouldn't feel like an imposter if you didn't care. So like
right.
it's an indication that it's something you really want to do. It's an indication that it means something to you, and it's an indication that you want to be better and that you
Yeah.
wish you were better. So it's a look at it as like a positive thing. Like, okay, I just need to keep working and learning, and
Yeah.
not let this derail me. I mean, sometimes like I think it's good, if it's really bad, sometimes it's good to take a break, do something else for a little while, talk to a
Yeah.
friend or something.
I was
There's a
gonna
lot of things
ask
you can do.
like if you guys could suggest like your top 3 ways of getting over imposter syndrome, what would you say they are? I can come
Uh,
back into you, but go for it.
yeah. So one, there was from the book Reframe Your Brain. The author of Dilbert wrote that book. He had
Mm-hmm.
to say, I mean, basically, people are scared of being an imposter, but his reframe was everybody's an imposter at something.
Mm-hmm.
So just recognizing that you've got this shared humanity with everyone else. Another thing is just embarrass yourself early, because that's like the exposure
Yeah,
that we're all afraid of. We're afraid of being embarrassed because we think we're going to be like kicked out of our social group and we're going to die, you know.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
generally, it doesn't happen. So if you can embarrass yourself early and recover from it, then you'll be like, okay, well, can't get much worse than that. And yeah, I have two at this point.
Okay. Go for it,
I would
Danny.
say one of my most important ones is can make self comparisons. And actually, if you're
Mm-hmm.
just starting out development, I would recommend like in a journal or something, like write down where you're at, what you know, come back like a week later, write down like just like a quick thing of like what you learned and stuff, and then you can look back at that and see how much you've actually grown over time. And that
Yeah.
can be a really good way to kind of antidote against, that imposter syndrome. The other thing too is just like, like Rainey said, everybody's an imposter at first, dude. It means you're learning. And even
Yeah.
when if you actually talk to people that are in a more experienced position, you'll realize they have questions too. That
Yeah.
it's just the state of being a person doing something you love, because you're going to want to learn more and grow. And that requires failure and overcoming obstacles, right? I mean,
Yeah. Totally.
that's how life is. Yeah. Those are my first two. So,
Go for it,
I got
Randall, and
my
then I'll
third. I
give
got my
my
third.
3.
Yeah. So my third would just be like step back and take a break and then just
Yeah.
get back into learning.
yeah.
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 So here's my 3, and they touch upon like many of the ones that you said. So I like what Danny said, but I would say even like to help yourself if you find yourself caught in imposter syndrome. Number one, like use your logic is, like you guys said, everybody's an imposter at some point, and it doesn't mean like nobody's gonna really call you out on that or like jump on like down your throat about it. I like it's just not a reality. It's in our heads. Number 2 is I think have like a goal for yourself, like a learning path, right? Like where do you want to be as a developer in 5 years, in 10 years, in 1 year, even, right? And by having that sort of focus, you don't have to think about comparing yourself to other people because you're like, I have a trajectory and I am like here on my way to here. And then you don't have to think about anything else, right? Um, what else? Oh, the second one I was gonna say is just own it, right? Like one of
Yeah.
the main tactics that I've learned when I was like doing sales a lot is if there's something like in a sale, like when you're talking to somebody and selling to them, and there's sort of like a white elephant in the room, something that like you feel like you need to talk about, but you feel uncomfortable about talking about it, usually the best thing to do is just call it out directly to that person and say, like, I feel like there's this going on. How do you feel about it? Because instead of it like sort of simmering underneath, you just bring it to the surface and then you can handle it. And so part of that like imposter syndrome, I think just owning it and saying like right now I feel like an imposter here, like how can I be better, helps you overcome it because you're not just like in this sort of hiding thing where you're like hiding that you feel like an imposter from other people. Like you can literally say it to other people. I feel like an imposter and I don't know this as well as everybody else. Is somebody willing to teach me? Right. Because that's how you can like overcome it. And then the third thing is, and I think this is a great one too, is finding mentors, right? Finding people who are just a little bit above where you are, a little bit further down the road, that can guide you and are not judgmental of you. Like they're not going to be like, oh, you're such a junior developer. Like, I don't want to deal with you. Just somebody who's just a little bit like better, a little bit further down the road, who's like, yeah, I remember when I was struggling with that a few months ago. And this is how I overcame it. Right. Cause that's like a really great way to just make your life easier and get through this sort of mindset. Cause I think a lot of software development and that imposter syndrome particularly is all mindset. It's just it's in
Yeah.
your head, you know. So I would say that's my three.
I would add just to that too with the mentor thing. I think is really good too because if people are really good at something and they like it, they love sharing anyway, and they'll
Exactly.
want to help you. So that's a good one. And my third one I would add too is something I always try to remind myself is just like the fact that other people are good at things provides an example that we can do it and we
Yeah.
can get there. So
Mm-hmm.
look at those other people as like a goal you want to get to yourself. Don't compare yourself to them, but see them as like the example. Like that's what I'm going to be in 5 years or whatever. And so if
That's
they did
awesome.
it, I can do it. It's just going to take time and effort. We always hear these stupid. The news loves to tell you an overnight success story, but none of those overnight success stories are overnight. They
No.
require tons of work, tons. They just like to cut all that out because it sounds cooler when they say, it was overnight.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I like what you were mentioning there, Danny, about 5 years, because I would say a lot of people kind of hold themselves to the fire, think they need to become a developer overnight or
Mm-hmm.
in a year or however
Yeah.
long it is. But if you look, people go to university for degrees that really don't get you anywhere other than a job at Starbucks, and that takes 4 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
And so,
just to
but
work at
like the
Starbucks.
thing, yeah, but like the thing is, given a long enough time frame, you can learn anything. And
Yeah.
if you really want to be like the crazy thing about being a developer, one, you can teach yourself. Two, you can learn for absolutely free. And then three, to go from junior to senior developer really only takes 5 years.
If that, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
if you dedicate yourself to one technology too, you can become very senior pretty quick. And
Yeah.
like I was actually thinking about this morning. I think one of the problems when you first become a developer is a lot of the education out there is like designed to teach you about every single piece of code and like technology under the sun. And the reality is, this is
And
my
you learn
opinion,
nothing
but yeah,
because
well,
it's
you
too
don't
much.
learn a lot because it's too much to take in at once.
Yeah.
But this is my personal opinion is that most companies, like if your goal is to become hired by a company, they don't want necessarily somebody who can do everything. They want somebody who's like very specialized in one thing, right? They want like a back end developer, a front end developer, an AI developer, something like that. Somebody who's very specialized and good at what they do. And so you can actually benefit yourself by just focusing on one technology or one tech stack because you actually like break yourself free of the mold of all these other developers who are like, yeah, I know every single language, I understand every database, I understand every cloud service, but they don't understand any of it enough to be like dangerous with it, you know? They're just like, I've heard of them and we talked about them before. So, yeah, just if
Well,
you're new, go down like find the route that you want it, like the job that you want at the end and go down that route and just focus on that and put on blinders to everything else because there's just so much noise. Go ahead,
and
Dan.
to your point too, I think once you learn something really well too, one language or one, back end or front end or whatever, anything else within that domain is going to be similar anyway.
And
And so you can
significantly
pick it up.
easier to
Yeah,
learn. Yeah.
yeah, because you can pick it up quickly after you know something really well. You can pick up other
Yeah.
ones pretty easily because they all do fundamentally very similar things. So I think that's also an important thing to keep in mind too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's a
that's a
good point.
great point that you really only need to learn one thing. Cause like I
Yeah.
know people that have been programming in like PHP for 15 years or SQL for
Yeah.
15 years. And I asked them, I was like, how did you get into that? And the PHP guy's like, well, I was messing around with some WordPress sites and I figured
Yeah.
I'd learn PHP. But he's never had to learn other things since. And he can always
No.
find work. And same thing with the SQL guy. He's like, I learned SQL in high school and my first job was SQL. And he's just like a SQL master, but that's all that he does. So if you just find that one thing that kind of perks your interest and just go down that rabbit hole, that'll take
Yeah.
care of you for life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think of it from like an employer perspective, right? If I'm an employer and I'm looking at resumes and I see two resumes next to each other, one that's like, I'm a back end developer, like Node.js developer. That's all I've ever done is Node.js. Like that's it. I love Node.js. And then this other dude who's like, I have Node.js, and React and all this, like a million other languages, if I need a backend developer, I'm gonna just hire the Node.js dude. I'm not gonna hire the other one because I don't need them to do these like 50 different things, right? And
Yeah.
and also because they've diversified so much, you can't show that this person has like passion in one particular area or expertise, right? They're just sort of like this jack of all trades, master of nothing. And so I think that's interesting because we all took the same boot camp and we all sort of went in different directions too. Like I went front end development with React and Firebase. Danny went Python, you went cybersecurity. So we all sort of diversified into our own sort of like vertical, but that's benefited us a lot. Like if we just sat there and we're like, yeah, we're all full stack developers who know every technology under the sun. You'd never get
AWS,
yeah.
Azure,
Yeah.
You
GitHub,
literally learned every
Python,
technology.
Django, SQL,
Yeah.
yeah, JavaScript, everything.
You'd know nothing though. We wouldn't be able to solve
You
any
wouldn't.
problems, you
Yeah.
know?
And you can't do anything. I mean, you can, I guess, build an app on your own, but like,
Oh yeah, I
what
forgot
do you,
Android Studio. I know that.
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my God, that too. Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. It was
Anyway,
ridiculous.
so
All right.
yeah, I think that's pretty good.
That's
Like,
good. Yeah.
nobody should have imposter syndrome here anymore. Okay. Like,
We're
doesn't
all
exist.
gonna feel it, but don't worry about it. Yeah.
No, you can't even feel it anymore. That's it.
Nope.
Well,
It's
the
gone.
cool thing
No.
is that you can work through it. So like
Yes.
recognizing that imposter syndrome is a feeling and it's totally normal to feel it, especially when you're doing something worthwhile for yourself. Recognizing
Yeah.
that that feeling will come and that if you continue doing what you're doing, it will go away. So just
Yeah.
knowing that you're going to go through this uncomfortable period for a while where you feel like an imposter, you feel like you're going to get found out, and maybe you will, but probably not. And you just got to keep going.
Yeah. So like use it as a cue to yourself. Every time you feel imposter syndrome, that's a cue to say, I'm on the right track. Like I'm doing the right thing because I'm learning. Right.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Awesome.
All right. Well, you guys have any other closing words? I mean, I think we nailed it on the head there. And hopefully everyone got some value out of this. If you did, throw a little like under there. That'd be nice. If you didn't, write us a comment why you didn't. Because why not? We're learning.
Yeah, hopefully
Why
you
not?
don't feel like a wolf in sheep's clothing anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or sheep and wolf clothing or
Oh,
something.
man. Oh man.
All right.
Well, thank you guys again for tuning in. We'll be back next Saturday for another live stream. We have yet to decide the topic of that one, but if you have suggestions, throw it down in the comments. If you guys want us to talk about something in particular, let us know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, thanks for hanging out, everybody, and hanging out in the group, and we'll see you soon.
Later.